Welcome everyone. This is the very last session of today, so I understand that some of you are tired. There is a translation device if you want to use them, because a couple of our presentation will be in Italian because of we hope that there are some regulators or people from public administration here, so we prefer to use our national language, being this our national conference. Per cui grazie a tutti di essere venuti. Capisco che è l'ultima riunione, che è l'ultima sessione del pomeriggio. Come abbiamo appena detto, c'è la disponibilità di un servizio di traduzione. Se siete interessati ad ascoltarci potete provvedere, potete farvelo, lo chiedete alle signorine qui, alle persone, alle assistenti. Ok, comincio io. Si sente? Sì, ok. Bene, si vedono già le slide. Questa è come dicevamo, l'ultima sessione. Si parla di OpenBIM per regulatory e ambiente, argomento che, come ho detto in una sessione della parte internazionale, è stato il vero fil rouge di questo summit. Si è parlato molto di regulatory, si è parlato molto di ambiente, e siamo stati coinvolti come gruppo della Regulatory Room in più o meno tutte queste sessioni. Io voglio solo rapidamente introdurvi cosa è successo in veramente pochi minuti, perché voglio lasciare spazio ai relatori, che sicuramente vi racconteranno cose più interessanti di quelle che stiamo facendo, di quelle che vi racconterò io. Allora, sono Franco Coin, sono un membro dello Steering Committee della Regulatory Room del buildingSMART International, e sono referente per l'equivalente della Regulatory Room internazionale, l'equivalente italiano della Regulatory Room internazionale, che è un gruppo che chiamiamo Rilascio Digitale di Permessi Edilizi. Rapidamente solo un paio di informazioni su cosa è successo. Se non avete seguito le nostre sessioni, c'è stato un cambiamento fortissimo nei processi regolatori. Al momento siamo solo in questo ultimo trimestre abbiamo avuto che in Brasile è stata approvata una legge per integrare il BIM nella gestione nel design e construction, quindi renderlo obbligatorio. In Giappone è stato scelto IFC, OpenBIM, come strumento per la loro architettura relativa al processo di building confirmation, e lo stesso in Portogallo è stato accettato una volta ancora IFC BIM come strumento per procedere in questa direzione, cioè all'uso regolatorio della presentazione di modelli e progetti. Fondamentalmente è una marea che monta, come si diceva giustamente, probabilmente tra un po' parleremo solamente degli argomenti e non più del fatto che si fanno col BIM, parleremo di approvazioni, parleremo di ambiente e non di BIM, perché monta la marea che dice che questo strumento sta diventando ormai di uso generale. È abbastanza impressionante vedere nelle sale quanti paesi stanno procedendo effettivamente su questa strada, quando solo alcuni anni fa, solo un paio d'anni fa, prima del Covid, eravamo veramente pochi. Con Nick Disbeth, che è il responsabile del regulatory del gruppo del regulatory internazionale, eravamo veramente in pochi a parlarne. Perché? La domanda potrebbe essere: perché sta montando sta cosa? Perché la Terra non è piatta ma tridimensionale. Potrebbe essere una risposta facile, forse anche simpatica, ma sicuramente stupida, perché, come vi parleranno poi i nostri relatori, in realtà il processo è importante e c'è bisogno di una volontà per farlo. Volontà che è legata a cosa? Sostanzialmente il punto su cui ci stiamo focalizzando, che diventa sempre più focale, è il fatto che il rilascio digitale dei permessi edilizi, cioè il momento del rilascio, è il punto di non ritorno che viene scelto da molti paesi come modo di entrata nell'utilizzo, nella diffusione dell'OpenBIM, nelle relazioni tra industria e pubblica amministrazione. Poi si racconta che si parla di indipendenza, accuratezza, veridicità, problemi, organizzazione, ma il segreto, il desiderio anche non tanto segreto della PA è che si vorrebbero introdurre dei controlli automatici e automatizzare alcuni processi. Cos'altro sta spingendo? Sicuramente l'aumento della complessità che ormai tutti abbiamo visto, sia la complessità della struttura degli asset costruiti, l'accuratezza ed affidabilità della comunicazione in catene di fornitura sempre più lunghe, sostenibilità e regolamentazioni. Non è solo un problema dell'industria, ma è un problema che sente molto forte anche la pubblica amministrazione, quindi sta spingendo. L'appartenenza alla regulatory room internazionale ci permette di avere una vista dall'alto, ci sono, guardando un po', facendo una geografia, una mappatura, ci sono dei primi della classe, come paesi come Singapore, Dubai, l'Estonia. A Finlandia l'ho messa nei diesel, ma in realtà con la presentazione di oggi sono assolutamente nei primi della classe, visto che sono partiti con un progetto molto, molto importante di cui ci parlerà poi Pekka. Diciamo, ci sono poi dei capitani coraggiosi delle città che hanno fatto scelte e dei diesel, come alcuni paesi, tra cui la Norvegia, di cui Oividin è qui un rappresentante, che hanno scelto delle vie sicuramente molto strutturate per raggiungere l'obiettivo dell'uso dell'IFC come strumento di gestione della normativa nazionale. La situazione è complessiva, forse avete già visto qualche volta questa slide che dice che parla del livello di maturità dei vari livelli di utilizzo del BIM nella pubblica amministrazione. Naturalmente la dematerializzazione non è digitalizzazione, questo è il primo aspetto, ma se andiamo a vedere cosa sta succedendo, e probabilmente questa mappa non è aggiornata perché in questi giorni abbiamo avuto nuove evidenze che altri paesi stanno facendo cose che portano l'uso del BIM sempre più ad essere un elemento di dialogo tra la pubblica amministrazione e il paese, sicuramente dà l'idea di cosa sta succedendo, di quanto si sta muovendo la cosa. L'altra cosa molto importante è che da tutto questo si sta imparando molto. Quasi finito. Un avviso su quelli che sono i 3 progetti finanziati dall'Unione Europea in questo momento. Sono progetti assolutamente importanti che hanno, come si dice, sono nella Twin Green, sono stati lanciati nell'ambito dell'iniziativa Twin Green and Digital Transition 2021. C'è il progetto Accord a cui partecipa la Finlandia, l'Estonia, quindi diciamo i primi della classe, UK, è presente anche la Germania con alcune attività e la Spagna. L'altro progetto molto più tecnologico, direi, o comunque più strutturale al rilascio all'utilizzo del BIM, o meglio che vede forse lo strato al di sotto, cioè la presenza di un framework digitale che permetta di fare questo, di utilizzare BIM in regulatory, è il progetto DigiChex. Poi c'è il progetto CEC, ve ne parlo un attimo di più perché ci partecipo anche personalmente. Sono presenti 4 municipalità, tra cui l'Italia, tra queste 4 municipalità una è Ascoli Piceno, che come sapete è in Italia, e quindi oltre a altre municipalità come Lisbona, come Praga e Viglia del Migno, insomma, una piccola, non riesco a leggere, scusate, non è cattiveria, ma sono veramente ceccato, come si dice. Ok, l'importanza di questi progetti è che tendono a coinvolgere tutto il processo di, come si dice, di tutti i processi di approvazione di permessi digitali, non solo quindi la parte relativa agli asset, ai tender che derivano per la pubblica amministrazione, ma tendono a coinvolgere anche quello che noi adesso vediamo essere l'approvazione di edifici privati, quindi le sue SUAP che voi ben conoscete. Sull'Italia non dico niente perché c'è il rapporto OICE del 2023 che sicuramente è più interessante di quello che posso dire io l'ho solo visto. L'unica cosa che mi è sembrato di capire da quel rapporto è che se andiamo a vedere chi è il paladino di OpenBIM per l'adozione nella gestione dei regolatori e sostenibilità, per la gestione di questo processo ci sono pubbliche amministrazioni illuminate sicuramente, PA centrali orientate al controllo, grandi player infrastrutturali come le ferrovie e le strade che hanno presentato qui, e anche associazioni di categoria dell'edilizia privata, ma il motore immobile in questo momento, ha sbagliato la bandierina, scusate, è sostanzialmente il PNRR, cioè il piano nazionale di il piano nazionale lanciato in corrispondenza a Next Generation EU europeo è sicuramente il motore che sta spingendo più di ogni altro. Per chiudere, chi siamo? Come ho detto, c'è una regulatory room internazionale, c'è una regulatory room italiana, questa è come vedete la regulatory room internazionale è veramente internazionale, sono compresi tutti i continenti. Le attività che stiamo facendo come regulatory room internazionale sono relative alla modifica dello standard IFC per uso in ambito regolatorio e la produzione di una guideline dedicata ai regolatori, diciamo alla pubblica amministrazione per procedere per procedere nel processo di adozione. C'è un capitolo italiano, il buildingSMART, che ho il piacere di coordinare e come vedete ci sono già dei membri che partecipano ed è sinceramente molto interessante partecipare e invito chiunque sia coinvolto in questi temi a farlo. Monitoriamo cosa succede in Italia e facciamo una promozione dell'OpenBIM nella PA italiana. In questo momento i nostri 2 progetti su cui stiamo lavorando riguardano la revisione della proposta e modifica dello standard IFC che, partendo dal progetto RIR, che è il progetto coordinato da Tommy Hentinen, che è qui presente, il progetto internazionale che prevede la modifica dell'IFC per le necessità di uso in ambito regolatorio, naturalmente stiamo cercando di costruire un contributo di dati P7 e altre cose che possono essere utili nel confronto con le richieste di altri paesi. E poi nella Guidance for Regulator, che invece è un progetto internazionale che guido io personalmente, e dove ci cerchiamo di costruire una guida, naturalmente diciamo che l'attività italiana sarà produrre appena possibile sicuramente una traduzione, ma soprattutto una guidance nazionale che si conformi a quelle che sono le caratteristiche della nostra legislazione. Con questo ho concluso, lascio la parola scusate un attimo. All'ingegnere Alfredo Ingletti, vicepresidente di OICE, che penso ci parlerà del rapporto appena pubblicato e degli interessantissimi dati che ci sono all'interno. Prego. Non so. Scusa.
Sull'interessantissimo, poi direte voi alla fine, no? Sinceramente quando si tratta di numeri, è piccolino, no? Mi servono gli occhiali. Allora, bene, grazie innanzitutto dell'ospitalità in questo convegno e per portare così un po' quelle che sono le valutazioni e le analisi, lo studio che l'OICE fa sul tema del BIM. L'OIC innanzitutto che cos'è? L'associazione aderente a Confindustria delle società di ingegneria e di architettura e di consulenza, però prevalentemente diciamo società di ingegneria e di architettura italiane, e raccoglie circa 400 associati al momento della più vasta estrazione, società di diritto pubblico come le ferrovie e società concessionarie come le autostrade e società private che sono quelle poi che compongono il corpo dell'associazione. Sulla spinta degli associati, già da una decina d'anni, l'OIC ha iniziato a osservare quello che succedeva nell'applicazione del BIM nelle attività di progettazione e poi ovviamente essendo un osservatorio complessivo su quello che era l'utilizzo di questi strumenti nell'ambito degli appalti pubblici e dei contratti pubblici. E da qualche anno, 6 per l'esattezza, sviluppa un'analisi, un'indagine, siccome l'OICE ha un osservatorio sui bandi di gara, ha un osservatorio sui bandi di gara in generale che vengono pubblicati in Italia, ha messo in piedi un focus in particolare sul tema del BIM nei bandi di gara pubblici, negli appalti pubblici. E quindi in realtà adesso io vi annoierò con un po' di numeri, però siccome più o meno gli ingegneri amano i numeri, probabilmente da questo qualche cosa trarremo. Nel 2022, e questo è il report 2023 che parla dei dati relativi chiaramente al 2022. Nel 2022 sono state pubblicate 1.003 gare di lavori di ingegneria in BIM. 1.003 ricorda il catalogo di Leporello, no? Che in Spagna sono già 1.003 e quindi è un numero importante di gare, no? L'87% in numero e il 5 volte in più in termini di importo dell'anno precedente. Questo significa c'è un'impennata, adesso vi farò vedere anche un diagramma, c'è un'impennata di queste gare negli ultimi anni. Il 75% di queste gare sono gare sopra soglia e questo era ragionevole aspettarselo perché sono tecnologie che ancora si pensa e si presuppone che si debbano applicare prevalentemente ai progetti di maggiore importanza e di maggiore dimensione e quindi siccome la soglia comunitaria è una soglia di carattere economico è ragionevole che la maggior parte siano di importo superiore. Diciamo che vedendo il dato alla rovescia il fatto che il 25% di quelle sotto soglia siano in BIM è già un dato importante, no? E infatti vedete quello che dicevo un attimo fa, che nell'ultimo anno c'è stata una importante impennata, diciamo la curva verso il basso secondo me è anche un po' legata ai fatti contingenti della pandemia, della riduzione complessiva delle attività a cavallo tra il 2020 e il 2021, quindi non gli darei un significato strutturale. Mentre invece è importante l'esplosione nell'ultimo anno che, come diceva giustamente prima, è fortemente trainata dai bandi legati al PNRR e a tutti gli investimenti del PNRR. Cioè comunque tra il 2021 e il 2022 c'è stato un incremento complessivo di bandi di gara e quindi anche in BIM ovviamente, però come effetto di un incremento complessivo dei bandi. E, come dicevamo prima, la maggior parte di questi bandi si colloca sulle procedure sopra la soglia comunitaria e comunque è evidente che i bandi legati al PNRR, poi lo vedremo pure nel momento in cui andiamo ad analizzare quali sono le stazioni appaltanti, quali sono i soggetti che più di tutti hanno utilizzato, applicato e imposto l'utilizzo del BIM nei propri bandi, nei propri progetti, questo è soprattutto legato ai progetti del PNRR. Una distribuzione geografica che una volta tanto ribalta e sfada quelli che sono i più vieti luoghi comuni dell'Italia, cioè che le cose di qualità si fanno al nord e invece al sud si è sempre un po' al traino. In realtà, statistiche alla mano, togliendo il tema delle isole così, diciamo la maggior parte dei bandi in BIM sono stati lanciati dalle stazioni appaltanti, comunque per progetti che riguardano il meridione. Sicuramente c'è anche qua un effetto, diciamo, traino del maggior volume di investimenti sul meridione rispetto all'interezza dell'Italia per il PNRR, però sinceramente, diciamo, da primo dei terroni mi sento gratificato del fatto che per una volta tanto al sud c'è una maggiore attenzione a questo tipo di dinamiche. Il Lazio fa storia a sé perché è chiaro che le amministrazioni centrali e le centrali di committenza più importanti come le ferrovie, l'ANAS che gestiscono i servizi pubblici a livello nazionale, essendo collocate nel Lazio, danno una maggiore prevalenza, però questo non vuol dire, il fatto che ci siano stati molti bandi nel Lazio non implica necessariamente che ci siano stati molti progetti nel Lazio. Da un punto di vista proprio numerico, il numero di bandi che, come vedete, insomma, è praticamente raddoppiato, ma il valore relativo dei bandi è di gran lunga superiore. C'è un'importante crescita degli accordi quadro, che sono uno strumento che è stato adottato in maniera sistematica per la realizzazione degli interventi del PNRR. E è una realtà che, come sapete, diciamo, per l'ingegneria è nuova perché deriva dal codice degli appalti testé abrogato del 2016, che dava la possibilità anche per i servizi e quindi anche per l'ingegneria di utilizzare lo strumento del contratto quadro. E nell'ambito diciamo, prima degli interventi emergenziali per il Covid e poi dell'applicazione delle varie misure del PNRR, lo strumento del contratto quadro è stato applicato in maniera estesa e, devo dire, sia da osservatore come OICE, sia da operatore come società di ingegneria, in maniera molto efficace, perché sono dei contratti che sono costruiti bene, sono molto efficaci nel distribuire rapidamente le risorse e poi danno la possibilità ai singoli enti usuari di gestire poi il processo di progettazione senza doversi far carico di tutto l'onere della procedura di gara. Pure dal punto di vista dell'operatore sono delle procedure standardizzate e quindi pure per noi è molto più facile accedere e rappresentare nella maniera più efficace le nostre competenze e capacità. Come vedete, l'importo dei contratti quadro è diciamo, più che proporzionale a quello delle gare singole di ingegneria, perché se è vero che 1,5 miliardi di importo è andato a 430 contratti quadro, mentre 2 miliardi sono andati a 1000 procedure singole, c'è una differenza rilevante. Quali sono state le stazioni appaltanti che più hanno incentivato, diciamo così, attraverso i propri bandi l'utilizzo del BIM? Sicuramente, come dicevo prima, le amministrazioni centrali sono quelle che hanno da più tempo iniziato un percorso, no? Poi voi ne siete stati testimoni quando non artefici, di questo percorso delle grandi centrali, delle grandi società di committenza. E quindi questi sono i numeri. Spicca quello che dicevo un attimo fa, quel 59% di Invitalia, perché Invitalia è quel soggetto che è stato chiamato a gestire questa molteplicità di bandi di gara del PNRR, ha fatto dei bandi di gara che prevedevano sistematicamente l'utilizzo del BIM e quindi inevitabilmente traina i volumi complessivi e anche un po' la distribuzione geografica, come dicevo prima. Dal punto di vista, tra l'altro, del tipo di procedure che Invitalia ha posto in essere, è interessante osservare che nei contratti quadro di Invitalia sono coperte dalle stesse caratteristiche tutte le fasi del lavoro, perché Invitalia fa la gara multilotto e mette progettazione, lavori, validazione, collaudo, e quindi alla fine in un unico bando di gara si applicano le stesse procedure anche relativamente all'utilizzo del BIM per tutte le fasi, quindi non abbiamo quella distonia tra magari il progetto fatto con procedure BIM e con richieste relative al BIM, ma poi una gara d'appalto che non rispecchia queste cose oppure lascia all'appaltatore la libertà di decidere, con il risultato che magari l'appaltatore in quella precisa, in particolare circostanza preferisce utilizzare strumenti, metodi tradizionali e crea una distonia tra la fase della progettazione e quella della realizzazione. Più virtuoso il processo opposto, laddove invece da un progetto magari più vecchio si aggiorna tramite l'offerta o tramite poi la predisposizione dei documenti di gara il contenuto informativo del progetto. Le autorità portuali, ultima a destra, quel simboletto magari non a tutti è immediatamente riconoscibile, hanno pure loro un ruolo importante nella gestione di questi progetti. E comunque, come vedevate, il 75% dei bandi rilasciati dalle amministrazioni pubbliche ormai ha questo tipo di caratteristiche. Questa è una distribuzione per tipologie di gare e per tipologie di opere, quindi come vedete la maggior parte delle gare, delle attività in cui viene imposto, viene richiesto l'utilizzo del BIM riguarda le attività di progettazione. Quel valore così alto della verifica della progettazione probabilmente è ancora un effetto di traino dei tanti bandi di Invitalia che in parallelo chiedevano lo stesso tipo di standard ai progettisti e ai verificatori. L'80% relativo alle opere esistenti e il 19% alle nuove opere è un numero che giustamente, diciamo, anche se pure questo deriva sicuramente dal traino delle gare di Invitalia e del demanio sulle varie linee del PNRR, però è interessante perché nell'immaginario collettivo il BIM si associa al nuovo, no? Tecnologia nuova per progetti nuovi, nuove opere con nuove tecnologie. Invece vediamo che in Italia molto spesso il BIM deve necessariamente riguardare le opere esistenti, anche perché noi comunque di quello tipicamente ci andiamo ad occupare, perché è una tradizione del nostro bel paese. Un altro aspetto importante che è stato studiato, analizzato e verificato nelle statistiche di questi bandi è l'incremento rilevante del peso nell'ambito della valutazione dell'offerta economicamente più vantaggiosa dato alle competenze e le capacità documentate e documentabili nell'ambito del BIM. Questo attiene sia il profilo della qualificazione personale, cioè dei professionisti che compongono il gruppo di lavoro e che devono documentare al meglio le proprie competenze in termini di BIM, sia in termini di organizzazione aziendale, perché molto spesso si premia in questi bandi proprio la capacità della società di gestire in maniera ordinata e organizzata queste competenze. L'incremento è stato rilevante tra il 21 e il 22, è ragionevole aspettarsi che questo aumenti e sicuramente è qualcosa che è negli obiettivi di chi come voi passa 2 giornate a discutere di questi temi in un consesso come questo. La nota dolente, che è sempre la nota dolente, perché? Perché il problema del BIM è che rappresenta per le aziende ancora un differenziale di investimento non marginale, cioè comunque siamo ancora in una fase in cui il BIM, per quanto ormai sia uno standard diffuso, anzi in certi contesti addirittura quando l'età media è molto bassa ormai è diventato prevalente rispetto alle altre precedenti forme di rappresentazione, però rappresenta ancora una necessità di investimento non indifferente, per cui se è vero che da un lato oggi probabilmente ha meno senso parlare di incremento dei costi legato all'applicazione delle tecnologie BIM, perché oggettivamente una società mediamente strutturata ormai ha raggiunto un grado di consapevolezza nell'utilizzo del BIM che le consente di essere sostanzialmente indifferente rispetto agli strumenti che utilizza. Però sicuramente ancora oggi applicare in maniera sistematica nelle proprie organizzazioni il BIM significa investimenti in software, in hardware e in formazione. E questi sono degli investimenti che rappresentano ancora un costo fisso che non è stato completamente sostenuto e soprattutto non è stato completamente ammortizzato. Per cui c'è bisogno di un sostegno forte da parte dell'amministrazione, diciamo del sistema delle opere pubbliche in particolare, per dare continuità alla domanda affinché chi dall'altra parte è chiamato a investire lo possa fare con la serenità e la tranquillità di trovare poi il corretto ritorno a questi investimenti nell'ambito dei progetti che va a sviluppare, anche in termini di, diciamo, molteplicità d'uso, no? Perché una cosa è se io devo fare un progetto e mi devo strutturare per fare un progetto o pochi progetti, una cosa è se lo posso applicare estensivamente a tutti i progetti di cui mi occupo. E quindi, siccome molto spesso ormai nella quotidianità il rapporto si è ribaltato, per cui è il professionista, il progettista che propone il BIM e deve spesso trainare l'amministrazione che, diciamo, si deve lasciar convincere ad utilizzarlo, tranne le più avvedute e le più diciamo, ispirate. Questo è un tema importante e su questo bisogna lavorare, soprattutto perché, insomma, adesso qua non vorrei toccare qualche tasto, qualche tema delicato, però credo che sia anche uno dei temi e dello spirito di questa organizzazione il fatto di avere pochi soggetti che offrono determinate facility rappresenta comunque un problema. Questo non è un problema italiano, è un problema a livello mondiale, perché sono temi che vengono affrontati a tutti i tavoli, diciamo non solo al tavolo italiano dell'OSCE, ma pure a quello europeo dell'EFCA e anche a quello mondiale di FIDIC, per trovare un giusto equilibrio tra le ragionevoli aspettative di chi investe nello sviluppo dei programmi e quelle che sono le esigenze di chi poi di queste cose se ne deve giovare e utilizzare per fare il proprio lavoro. Questa slide, siccome qui la presentazione ce l'hanno fatta consegnare il 17 come deadline, forse questa slide è un po', diciamo, anacronistica, perché ormai nel frattempo ieri sera il nuovo codice degli appalti è stato approvato, le prime letture che ne abbiamo fatto sono, diciamo, portano ombre e luci ancora da interpretare, però sicuramente il tema della digitalizzazione dell'amministrazione è un tema centrale, ineludibile, e quindi da questo punto di vista diventerà anche per il BIM un inevitabile traino all'interno di una sfera di trasformazione della pubblica amministrazione che in qualche modo ormai è diventata ineludibile, e quindi da questo punto di vista sarà sicuramente un aiuto al sistema per consentire una definitiva una definitiva affermazione di questi nuovi sistemi. Vedremo di che sarà, perché l'hanno approvato ieri sera e già stamattina in audizione parlamentare si parlava di decreto d'aggiustamento, quindi vediamo che cosa succederà. Mi sembra più o meno tutto, grazie, e poi se ci sono domande sono a disposizione. Grazie.
Grazie ingegnere Ingletti, quindi siamo nel quarter 1, anche l'Italia dovevo metterla nella scheda dei paesi che stanno facendo crescere l'onda dell'OpenBIM. Lascio la parola adesso a Pekka Virkamaki, penso di averlo detto giusto. L'ingegner Virkamaki è un Senior Ministerial Advisor del Ministero dell'Ambiente della Finlandia, sicuramente una voce importante in questo momento, perché come avrà modo di dire la Finlandia sta mostrando molte cose e molti di noi stanno cercando di seguirla. Thank you, Mr. Virkamaki.
Okay, thank you, President. About the possibility to tell what we are doing now, just today in Finland, according to BIM. The pattern is IFC to become a mandatory building permit document in Finland. We had shown that our government, or excuse me, our government, our parliament approved new legislation just 1 month ago, so that BIM will be compulsory document in every building permit process of buildings, so that all single houses up to nuclear plants need to deliver BIM designs of their project, so that, and it will be kind of the law. Building Act has been approved, and it will stay in power from the beginning of 2025, so that it will be a compulsory document. First, building permits are applied by using BIM or other machine-readable formats. Our National Archiving Office approved IFC4 to be a document for permanent archiving of documents, so that this, if you think about BIM documents, this is the only format that has been approved to be permanently archived. And that means that, of course, all kind of public documents must be in the form that is publicly archived, so that it means that IFC4 is now the kind of the winning horse that we have decided. Also, first you need to give the BIM for the building permit phase, but before you get the final inspection, you have to give the BIM documents, all BIM documents, as this kind of digital twin documents that also include the materials that have been used in the building before you get the final inspection and the permit to use the building to the purpose that it has been done. Also, it is so that from this document you have to, when the building is finalized, you have to deliver a machine-readable operating and maintenance manual for your building, so that we can check about the life cycle emissions of the building also through these documents, and also the basic rules for the upkeeping of the building. Here is the kind of the picture of why we can do this demand, is so that 80% of our building industry and the designers are using BIM in somehow of their work. Not totally, but anyway, so that it is the normal way of designing and kind of a tool in the building process also in Finland. And also if you think about what we are now doing, so that we had this kind of automated building processes from 2015, so that we got this kind of, for the building control, this kind of processing program for the building control activities that we have been developing, and now we are kind of ready to take the next step to use the BIM in the BIM and artificial intelligence, and also make checking rules for our building control activities, and so with that also enhance the using of BIM in our building industry. We have this kind of to-do map for BIM definition, so that we have to have the checking rules now for BIM use case by use case, so that we find these automated checkings for some part of the building control activities. In Finland, the building control checks only kind of norms that are kind of important for the public interest, so that we concentrate on the things, for example, fire safety, structural safety, this kind of handicapped systems, and also the environmental questions. In our new legislation, we have defined what kind of features the building must have concerning the hand and footprint of the CO2 emissions, and also circulation economy. That includes also information of the materials and how much CO2 it is using. The next step is then to integrate our legislation, so that when we renew our building code, all rules should be tested. Are they machine readable or not? We are doing it already in our taxation legislation. Here are the kind of what we are now doing. We are doing checking rules for architectural, structural, and IBIMI designs, and we have already more than 50% of the checkings that the building control have to do. But then we have also these use cases that we are struggling with. It is the first ones are the carbon footprint and handprint, and then the circular economy calculation rules. We have to automatize them directly from BIM, because the calculations are so complex that without BIM and this kind of use case checking rules, it is impossible to control them by the public sector. Here is the kind of the path that we have been following from 2015. First, we got the electronic building permit processing system. We have been developing it all the time. So then we have this kind of 2018. We tested some use cases concerning this kind of IFC documents that we got from certain kind of projects, and that how defined what we can do with BIM and what is then we have to wait for. For example, the kind of the colors and the materials, surface materials, it was not possible to kind of check them before the IFC 4 gave us tools also for that kind of checking. Then in last October, our National Archive Office approved IFC 4 to be the permanent archiving format, so that now we have also this kind of firm basic for then to take this IFC4 to use, and then we are now kind of preparing a bylaw so that we can there then kind of define that about the formats and how kind of deep this IFC format has to show us so that we can check the necessary things. And then the next step is then to make it in force in 2025 and 2027. We are building up now national register for all building permits and building permit documents, so that we will get a kind of national register where there is all designs of new buildings that will be built after 2025 and for the future use. For example, the owners can, after 30 years, when they do the capital renovation of the building, they have all the drawings and also information of the materials that the building has eaten. One of the kind of the drivers why we took the BIM in use is this kind of climate declaration and material declaration, new rules that we adopted. Our government decided 2 years ago that Finland will be zero emission country in 2035. It is 15 years before the EU has declared to be carbon-free continent in 2050. And that's why we have very kind of progressive environmental legislation now approved by the parliament. And now we are doing this bylaw of climate declaration and material declaration. We have already the kind of bylaws ready, and they are now under commenting of our industry and all participants. It is also in English, so that I can maybe send it if we are very happy to get comments also from Italy of these. Here is the rules for carbon footprint and carbon handprint. We have to have both, because otherwise we don't get enough information. There will be also certain kind of minimum standards given for the new buildings that they have to comply so that they can get a building permit. And we will then check them before we give the final inspection for the building. And we hope that we will get then good information of carbon emissions of the buildings, and to use it in the decision making in the future, and also we try to guide the builders to use techniques and materials that produce less carbon. Here is then the basic points. There is the building components. We have this kind of building components dictionary where we have this kind of standard CO2 emissions of the building parts. It is, we have it kind of national dictionary of that. Then the materials are then defined, and then also the origin of materials, so that we can kind of calculate also the emissions that have, if they have been brought from China, so we take also the transport emissions in that hold. The necessary tool to kind of control these emissions, because they are not in the interest of the end user or the builder, so that it is the public administration that has to control about these things, and that's why we have to also use BIM in that field. And here are then the basic kind of things that we have in the new bylaw concerning this material and CO2 emissions. And as I said, we have the national database of all building materials, this average building materials of their use of CO2. And this will be then the digital platform for built environment. I'm speaking only about the buildings. There is coming new legislation of the city planning, because in the city planning you kind of can make better decisions of CO2 emissions than in a single building project. The kind of the CO2 emissions, more than half is kind of connected to the city planning, and that's why we have to have the both. But it is coming maybe in the next 4 years. And here is the kind of the connection between BIM and the life cycle emissions. Why we went so fast with the BIM, it was so that we have this kind of green left government that wanted to enhance the kind of this environmental questions, and then the tool also that they saw that this is necessary is also to develop the BIM in use of in building processes. But our kind of we were sure that BIM was the winning horse already 5 or 6 years ago, so that we have all the capabilities in the public administration, in building control offices, most of them. We have 280. It is nothing to compare with Italy, of course, but anyway, and more than 260 has this electronic processing system, and then only the smallest that represent under 1% of the all buildings, they are using then other systems. Here is the kind of then showing the emission database that we have already collected in Finland about materials. Then the Accord project is also, we are part of the Accord project, as was already mentioned here, and we hope that from there we get the use cases of the controlling of these CO2 emissions and materials. And I'm very sure that it will be, and it is an international project, so that we hope that it will be also kind of accessible for all European countries, because the kind of the calculation of CO2 and the struggle of the climate state is not kind of including only one country. Here is then the kind of the Accord project. They have made for us already this kind of process description, how the Finnish process is connected, and how the Accord project wants to help us to find the new tools for controlling of the emissions. And here we have then the kind of the partners in the Accord project. Thank you.
Thank you, Pekka, for your Mr. Pekka, for your impressive presentation. Of course, every time we start seeing this, we ask ourselves, "Oh my God, and what have we to do to reach that level?" So that's something that is really interesting. Now is the time of Øyvind. Øyvind Roth is the let's say he's an old friend actually, because he was about the regulatory room previous responsible, and is a specialist in the director of Norwegian Building Authority. Please, Øyvind, up to you. Øyvind, up to you.
Okay, thank you. First of all, following Finland, I'm really impressed what's going on there, and I hope and think and believe it will be an inspiration for the rest of Europe. So, yeah, we will following you. Okay, I'm here for presenting the CEN TC 442, the Building Information Modeling. That is the BIM committee in CEN. First, a little bit by myself. I'm working with the Norwegian Building Authority. I'm chair of the CEN TC 442. I'm also chair of this ISO TC 59 SU13. That is the BIM committee in ISO, which we collaborate a lot with to have the same leadership. Standards Norway have the secretariat for both committees. And I can tell you it has been very valuable that we are able to collaborate, because we collaborate a lot on ISO level as well. I'm also chair on the technical board for construction standards Norway. So standardization is what I do the most of the time at the moment. I have been dealing with building permits since the last millennium. I think we started in 1999 with working with the building permit project in Norway, from some ideas from the municipalities of Oslo, quite early in the late 90s. And we have a system. I will not present the system today, but I think when it will be a buildingSMART conference in Norway in September, we shall present in detail what we actually do in Norway. It's falling down here. Okay. I will not go so much in the scope, but just so you are aware about this, we have a name on building information modeling on the CEN committee, but that is just a name. The scope describes actually what we do, and it's all about digitalization and standards needed for digitalization of the construction sector. But it's important to understand that we do not make any property definition, anything. We just make the standard that is needed to digitalize what other standardization committees in CEN and ISO do. So if you're looking for some standards with some numbers or calculation method for emission, CO2 emission, for example, that is not something we do, but we make the standard and it's possible to digitalize that information and use it in tools. The structure, the 442 is growing. So we have at the moment 10 working groups. I see from some reason there is, 10 working groups. They follow the first thing we did start actually was to adopt IFC as a European standard. This committee started in 2015, and the first we did was to adopt IFC as a European standard. That is the basement for everything we do. And what we learned from that when we did that actually is that the discussion about which format or which standard we should use for OpenBIM in Europe, that was closed more or less. Don't hear that discussion so much anymore. And that also, I think, if you go to the technical part, I had to ask in the regulatory room what they did in Finland, and Tommy could confirm that, of course, in the legislation it's not IFC, it's EN ISO 16739 from 2018, that is something you can use in legislation. So even it's buildingSMART who own the standard, but they make it as an ISO standard. Going through the ISO process at the moment, we are doing a query on the next version of IFC 4.3. And if everything goes well, it will be an ISO stamp on this in this summer or early this autumn. And we do this parallel in SEN, so that means that it will be an EN standard at the same time. So this is an important collaboration and huge technical stuff we do in the standardization. We also have a working group 7 I will just talk a little bit about here. That is what we call a horizontal role. What we do there is that we work with information that for example, all the product TCs in SEN that define the properties needed for the CE marking and everything, and a lot of them is connected to the CPR, is how they can make those property machine readable and connected to BIM. Because the information and the property definition is done in these committees, so we will just give them the receipt how they can make this machine readable. And we have also used a lot of effort with SEN, which this year actually opened up, so it's now possible to have machine readable content as a part of the standard, so that can be machine readable. And then, of course, those of you working with implementation of this easily can get this information from the standards into the tools, into the dictionaries, whatever you need to build a framework. So this is a huge step for SEN, and I can tell you that has been some discussions. And we have the working group 10, that is a strategy group. Maybe the most interesting thing at the moment for this group is that this group now had set down an ad hoc group discussing if we are going to have a working group for building permit in 442, not to do everything what they do in buildingSMART or something, but see if there is some guidelines how to use standard, there is something we should do in here that is regarding to standards on the European level. But no decision is made yet. So I don't know the result of it, but we are looking into it to support. So this is how this main relationship, the map of relationship we have is much larger. But this is the simplified one. This is the 442. We collaborate, as I told you, a lot with ISO, SE13, through a formalized regime they have in agreement between ISO and SEN, called Vienna Agreement. We follow quite closely. And then we also follow IEC, that the electrical standardization, and other what we call industry standardization, as for example buildingSMART. So buildingSMART is a so-called liaison A member, highest level of liaison with SE13, can propose project directly to standardization and everything. They have no voting right, but they have the rest of it. And again, we also collaborate with buildingSMART through SEN. It's a lot of European experts that are in all these committees. And then, as I told you, we have this follow up the rest of the SEN and SEN-elect committees and try to make it easy for them. All these committees have a demand from the users. You should support BIM. They have no clue what BIM are. We explained for them what BIM are and how they should support it. And of course, EU Commission and other EU initiative as an EU BIM task group. Just this renovation wave that is just as an example, this is the new Green Deal. What's relevant for us is that the EU Commission had identified that the construction is one of the most important sector, as you know, And they have this digital logbook, they have building information modeling as such, technology, and digital building permit is some of the action point they want to follow. That's the reason why we have this research project and so on, and also this focus on BIM. And at the moment now, last week, the Commission presented this transition pathway for construction, which will be, there is a lot of tasks there, what action they want to do. And what we discuss here is an important part of this. And we see from that report that digitalization and BIM is an important part of how they want to implement this strategy. So what we try to tell in every corner in EU that please, research project is okay, but maybe we already have many of the standards you need to implement this. So there should, you don't need to start to implement new standards. We have made a mapping of all the most relevant standards we have in 442 and related committees. In the middle one there, the core in the middle is the IFC standard. But it's 19650, there is the LOIN, what we call the LOIN standard, there is the process standard and everything you need to digitalize the construction sector. So the next step is for the Commission, national authorities and everyone, they need to build an infrastructure on top of this and have a feeling that is what's happening in Finland at the moment, using these standards. So, but just to take a practical example from Norway, I have only from Norway, so, but after seeing the example from Finland, I have to come back to this in September. But just to take, this is a drawing, I learned also today that you have made this figure more fancy in the regulatory room. This is the original one. But it's quite useful to starting when we discuss about digitalization and the building permit process in different countries. So this was made in the regulatory room some years ago, just to try to, where you have this, let's say, every country have a system that you need to ask someone before who approve that you are give you allowed to build something. But they have different name on this and everything, but so we have the concept phase, that's you accept you can build that on this place for that usage on this size and so on. The construction design is the how do you build it, technically, and then it's a construction phase and you approve that the construction according to the approval, and then it's a handover in use. So the authority control is normally in this red. You see the red dot there in most. And then these red boxes shift a little bit. You can have part of this authority, some private. But what we have done in Norway is we have more or less privatized everything. I'm not quite sure there is so many others that have done it. So that means we just accept that we are allowed to build this building. How we build this is up to the industry. That means that it's much more easy to make digital the tools and so on, because we can have the industry to develop them, built on the same standards. So we have a BIM system, and I will just give you two last figures just to show how we think about this. It is that we have, if you have a BIM model, on IFC4. There is an API on the internet, the service we have today, that you can check, use MVD-XML. We will update it to this new IDS standard coming from buildingSMART. MVD-XML is a buildingSMART standard. That we check that the information is there, because the requirement we have to the information that shall be in a building permit is defined in this MVD-XML, and there is a tool that checks the BIM model, see if the information is there. Statsbygg, that Norwegian property owners, state property owners, and other in the industry in Norway use this tool to check if the information according to the contract is there. And if there is not, we use this buildingSMART standard, BSF, to report back. So this is up and running and worked quite well. but there's not very many using it because we haven't done it mandatory yet, but we have tested it, so we know it's work. But what we're struggling in, and I also hear that Finland also struggle with, is that we have had for some years a demand for the government to make our building regulation machine readables, and especially the technical one, the building codes, telling how you should build this, fire safety and accessibility and so on. And we have, I have to say, we struggle with to find the right method. So we also are, we will looking to Finland. If you learn something there, we will look to this EU project, and hopefully there will be a standardized way, a receipt for all of us. This is the best practice, so we can follow, because this is not easy. But we also said that the rule engine in Norway has to be on private side. I see that many of them have a feeling that the Finnish maybe is there as well, that you have the rule engine on the public side, but we have said that is for the private sector to deliver. We will not, we just deliver the rules. Yeah, so just to wrap up shortly, maybe first of all, CEN/TC 442 are there to help you to make standards. We do not compete with buildingSMART. At all. We just adopt if there is buildingSMART want to have standards approved by CEN and ISO, they can easily do so if they want to, and we will adopt them if we find it right to do so. And, but there is more standards, much more standards, and that has been a discussion during this summit here that I think is quite good. To have buildingSMART understand that to digitalize the construction sector, you need more than IFC. IFC is just enough. So I think this summit has been a good start on this. So that's all for me. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Øyvind, and last but not last, Christian Stranz, sorry, Head of Research Unit of Digital Building Process in Wien. And just to tell you that we are using your papers in editing our building guidance for regulators.
Oh, thank you. So, thank you to Lorenzo and his buildingSMART team to invite me to give a little short talk about what we tried to do and what we did in Vienna. Last November, I got hosted by him, and I realized how nice Roman people can be to us Austrians. And then he saw what we did and said, you have to come here and present a little bit. As you can see, actually we should be two people. Harald Urban, he just got sick, unfortunately, but he wrote me that he's going to be better right now. I'm the head of the research unit, Digital Building Process at the TU Wien. I'm also a member of the buildingSMART board, buildingSMART Austria board for education. That's the way I met Lorenzo. And also part of the International Steering Committee. And Harald Urban, who should be here today, is also the head of the working group for the OpenBIM permit process in Vienna. So he's in Austria. So he's trying to bring the information we got in this project I'm presenting you to all the other communities. A few years ago, we thought about how digital are the communities. And we made some kind of a maturity level model for building authority processes, where we mean always the digital maturity level. And it's a little bit copied from the ISO 19650. So at the first stage, of course, the zero level is the old way. You bring papers to the building authority. And then the next step is actually that you have this kind of digital submission. In Vienna, some people say BDF is not digital, but of course it is. And it's, we think, a very, very important first step, because you not only hand in the documents as PDF files, so you don't have to go to the building authority, but the PDF files also transmitted to the right person in the building authority. And in a big city like Vienna or Rome, you have a lot of different departments being part of this permission process. And therefore, this level 1 is also a kind of motivation for all the communities to come to this level. And my experience in Austria, in Germany, in Switzerland is everyone is working on this level 1 at the first stage, and then looking to the next one. And the next level would be what we call what we did in the Prise Vienna stage, that you hand in OpenBIM models. When we talk to small communities, they say, OpenBIM or BIM at all is a little bit too far away. But in reality, it's just the next step. And if you've done right level 1, level 2 is just a little bit a change to BIM. And we called this project Prise Vienna. And I wanted to hand in the main slide we normally use when we begin to talk about this project. Because when we started it, actually, we, as the TU Wien, did not start it. Actually, the city of Vienna started it. The city of Vienna has about 14,000 building applications every year. Most of them are very small ones, but some are quite bigger projects. And so the agents of the building authority said, we need help. It takes too long to make a building permission, and we need support. And they realized maybe BIM could be the support, so they asked some other partners. And another partner was ODE, and Tina, who was doing a lot of the BIM work, is sitting here. So if you have some BIM specific related question, Tina is definitely wanting to answer that. And then TU Wien. And one very important partner is where you see the ZT, which is the Chamber of Architects and Civil Engineers in Austria, because we wanted to have them on board. They should control every step. They should give input at every step. So at one part you had research units like TU Wien, you had some BIM specialists like ODE, and you had the building authority as well as the Chamber of Architects on board. And every step we discussed with each other, and we tried to improve the process. And at the beginning we thought, what kind of models do we need? And the first one, that's what we call the BAM. So also Austrians like to have abbreviations, and the BAM is the Building Application Model, which is the domain model in architecture. I will talk about that in a few minutes, in a few seconds actually. The second model, we call it RAM. It's a reference model, it's kind of an envelope. And then we designed a model which we called SIM. Actually, we called it in the first part AIM, but then realized AIM is not a good choice, to be honest. And all of this part goes together as a checking model. And all the time we were thinking about when we use BIM for building applications and building permits, we have to use IFC, we have to use an open format. And there are several reasons. One of the reasons, in Austria, the building authority is not allowed to force the architects to use a certain software. So this has to be software independent. And the second part, as we heard also today, it has to be stored for quite a long time. It has to be accessible for quite a long time, all the models which are handed in. And then IFC comes into the game. So first, we have a short look at the building application model. It's an domain model architecture, level of information about 300, level of geometry is 300. And so we decided in the process what has to be designed, what has to be in this model, which kind of building elements, which additional objects of the builder, which the authority needs to have a decision to give a building permit. And also the building volumes. This has to be controlled also by the building authority. As I heard right now, in some countries, the building authority doesn't have that much influence in the whole life cycle. In Middle Europe, the building authority also decides before you can move in. So even if the building is finished. And also you need some information about the surroundings. So you have to tell the architect, what do you have to model in your BAM? What has to be in there? And we did all this and describe it in a document so that they can get the information and make the model in the first stage right. The second model is the RAM, the reference model as we call it. And the reference model is actually an envelope of what can be built. So if you take the development plan, in Austria, for example, the development plan tells you exactly what you're allowed to build, what you're allowed to build on this construction site. You don't have to ask for this permission to plan something there. You have to ask for permission to build it afterwards. And one of the problems we have is that this plan is legalized in Austria as a drawn plan. And as you can imagine, if a plan of modeling 1 to 500, it's not very exact. It's not a digital plan which is legalized. This might be in the future, and then you might not need this reference model later on. You might need it, but not done by the building authority. So what the building authority is doing, it takes the surveying plan and makes this envelope. The third model is the service information model. And as you can see, it doesn't look like a model, it's just a cube. But it's a cube because it has some information which cannot be given geometry or like an LOE. So you need some extra information which are not in the envelope. For example, let's have a look there. We have, at construction sites, we have additional information and they are written in text. And this information, for example, says, if you make a roof, 1/3 of the roof has to be a flat roof and 1/2 of that had to be a green roof. And this information, but it doesn't tell you exactly where this is located. So you have to give this information to the checking model at the end to check if this is fulfilled, but you cannot put it in the envelope at the beginning. And so you have some additional information. Or there could be like, on this side of the building, there's not allowed to be a window to the road because of whatever the agent in Austria thought, 1960. And what we used in this project is a little bit of artificial intelligence, because we thought, how can we train the AI to read all the text and get this information deducted from this text? And as you can imagine, the AI is working okay, but not excellent. And the reason is you need a lot of test data to make an AI being good. And we don't have that many construction sites in Vienna. But one point is what we learned in the future, this information, which is now a part of textile document put to this development plan, should be readable, machine readable. So you don't have to need to interpret a text. And all these three models, they come together as a checking model of the building authority. And when we look at the process, and it's something I heard today, is like you can digitize, or you can digitize and change the process. And what we did together with the building authority, and as I told at the beginning, they were always part of the research team. They were actually the main partner of the research team. We discussed the processes, and we discussed, should we change some steps of the processes because of the things you can do when you digitize the process. And so we had several steps. At the beginning, as I told you, you need a surveying plan. This surveying plan is then used for the reference model. And this has to be checked. And then there's some point in the middle, which became quite important and much more important than we knew at the beginning of our project. And this was the BIM pre-checking. What does it mean? The architect said, I want to check my model if it's okay even to hand it in, to submit it to the building authority. Not to submit it and get a report back and says, you know, your model is not good enough and you have so many collisions with the law. So you can check it as often as you want before you submit it, but not against all rules. And we will see that later, why. And when you are fine with your model and say, now I want to hand it in, then you can hand it in with all the other documents. And actually, after you hand it in, just at this step, the RAM is built and also the SIM model, the service information model. Because just at this step, the building authority starts to work and starts to go into this process. And the reason why, it needs some documents you have to hand in. So at the beginning, we were checking all the legal matters, the building legal matters of the city of Vienna, and we realized if you go through every paragraph of the Viennese building code, all the paragraphs of the garage law, yeah, the garage law has some importance in Vienna, and we have some so-called OEB guidelines. They make more so building technical matters. But if you go also legal matters, we realized only about 55 of it can be transferred to checking rules because the other ones, they define the process. So they have nothing to do with checking the model itself. And then we looked also at the technical matters, and here we realized from all the regulations, about 86%, they are relevant and should be transferred into checking queries. So what did we do? With the building legal matters, we looked about 434 paragraphs. We evaluated all of them. We created 219 checking routines and 898 single checking rules out of that. And as you can see, about 72%, we could make the checks with the checking software, with the model checker. We used Solibri in this stage. And for about 20%, we used an API and we had to do some programming on our side. But 8%, the check were not possible. It sounds a little bit hard, we will see later. It not possible means either it is much too much work for an architect to make this, to give this information in the model, and it's not worth the time because it's quicker for the building authority to just check it on the model. And then we realized we are not going to transfer that into a check. And then we also looked at the building technical matters. It was about 1,200 paragraphs we were evaluating, and we got about 1,700 single checking rules. So we're talking about 1,200 checking rules which were created during this project in Vienna. And again, about 16% we did not transfer to checking rules. How can such a process look like? One example is, as I said, the garage law in Austria is kind of important. You have a paragraph which says if you have a certain amount of parking spaces to create in your building or at your building, you have to have, after more than 30, you have to have one parking space for a disabled person. So you have to create, first of all the individual parking spaces as in a level of geometry. And then you have to identify 1, 2, or 3, whatever, how many parking spaces that they handicap accessible. And you have to prove that. When we were doing all this process, we realized we have about 3 kinds of checking rules. The first one is the automatic checking rule. So the result is automatic here and it says done, yes or no. And these checking rules, they can be used also for the pre-check because they run automatic. You don't need an agent to decide. I've shown one here which is about the proof of light exposure. So in Austria, or in Vienna, it's designed if you have a living room and it has a certain size, the windows have to have a certain size. But if the living room has like a length or width of more than 5 meters, the percentage goes up. This is a very tedious work, and if Harald would be here, we would tell you he did it sometime, and it's not nice to do this and measure all the parts. And now it's done by check, very quick. Another one is proving that all the doors have the right width. So this one goes completely automatic. And then we have a semi-automatic checking rule. And one is, I've seen Simon is here, so he was programming this rule. So you can ask him about it. It's like the escape route analysis. In Austria, the architect has to decide the route when you have, let's say you have a fire, and you have to leave a room, and he has to use the longest way to a safe space. Also, this is a tedious work. You have to mark all the rooms where you have to escape, then you have to draw in the lines, and you have proof it's not longer than 40 meters or certain lengths. And we do that on a button press. You press the button, you get the rules. We tested it against some buildings, and I think the longest we had was 16 seconds for all the escape routes. But then the architect has to do the next step. He has to decide which route he's taking. So he gets several choices he could make, and then he has to decide it, and he has to mark them. So that's the only step the architect has to do. And later on, we can use the same checking rule for the building authority to prove that the length is not too long and that you have fulfilled this rule. But here, you need the agent to do one step. And then we have a supporting checking rule. For example, in Austria, it's also important that the building authority is checking if the statics looks right. You know, he gets documents where they prove that it's right, and we can show visually that all the load-bearing elements, and so there's a visual first check, and it supports the agent to make this kind of decision. And so we have some rules where you have the agent to make a decision, which is legally required. We cannot make the computer to make all the decisions. So after we have programmed all these checking rules, we started last summer with a pilot phase, and we used 13 projects by architectural offices, and they did something which normally not a lot of architects are doing. They did their work twice because they had to hand in this project normally, meaning by PDF, and they had to hand it in as OpenBIM file. And then all these projects were checked with our OpenBIM checking, and they were also checked by a like the agent doing a normal work in the step. And so we could prove, the rules are working as they should, and how much time does it also take to make this new checking routine. What we also did is we used some students, because students have one big advantage. When you're at the university and you have students, you can ask them to use a certain software. And we wanted to use the 3 most used softwares in Austria to have certain projects that we can check if the software is also exporting IFC the way we need it, or if there's some problems. And so if there were problems, we could make a check, a report, and tell maybe the architects how they have to change a little bit to get what we need. And so we used 5 ArchiCAD files project, 3 in Revit and 3 in Alplan. And we also checked this one against the building law. And as I mentioned, when we evaluated all the building law, then we made this checking criteria, we tested them, and all the time we took feedback from the architects and also from the building authority, because we worked together with all the time with them. And after finishing this cycle several times, we started the pilot phase, and at the end we checked, yes, the legal information matrix is right, the documentation of the checking routines works, and the checking routines work, and we also documented all the checking routines. So that was something we realized, who is going to maintain the checking routines? In Austria, it would not be possible to have a private company doing it all the time. So this is part the building authority has to do, and so we are going to train the building authority to do this job, so that they can maintain, if something changes, they can change what is being needed. And when we're doing when we were developing all these checks, we were looking how much time do we save and how much is the modeling effort. And that's the reason why we didn't put all what could be done in checking routines or could be modeled in the model. As I mentioned, like 14% of the technical matters. And the reason is because the modeling effort would be too much, and you don't want to have the architects to be against OpenBIM submission. Since my research institute also is working on several other technologies, we decided we want to have a look at also this step after the OpenBIM check. It's what we call the conditional objections. Neighbors have a certain right. They can object against something. They cannot object against everything, although some people might think, I want to object everything. And so we decided we need to help them, and we could use the OpenBIM model to help. And what we were doing is we used augmented reality in the permit process. So at the beginning, we have some project, and the agent is choosing a project and say, okay, this project is now going to the stage where you have discussion with the neighbors. And then he marks and gives all in the names of the people who are allowed to make objections and who are invited. Then he chooses the documents, which are the people allowed to view it. And the person, like the neighbors, they get an invitation by email with a QR code. And then the first thing is that we use a model and say, let's look at the documents. So, and now at the beginning they get a test building. They do not get the right building, but here they get explained what does building height mean. What are the legal requirements for that? So they get this information. Sometimes the legal text might not be so good to read, but they get the information also against what they can object and against what they cannot object. So later they go to the project. Actually, our model is the programmer of this tool. And now they would see the project. What we realized, for most of the neighbors, they are not civil engineers or architects. They cannot read a plan properly. So they need some visual support, and that was the reason for developing this. And now they say, okay, I'm against something. I think he doesn't like the height of the building. Or he thinks he doesn't like it. And that nice thing is also that the building authority then sees all the complete list of the objections and can also answer it earlier. And then we have this where all the neighbors can come together and have a discussion. And at this time, the building authority officer can choose the model and can mark something and say, I'm talking now about this. And he makes a live selection. And the other person, they have a tablet, they see the theme marked on their model. So they know about what the agent or the officer is talking about. And for us, the next step after Prise Vienna would be level 3. We would like also to have the development plan completely in 3D. Right now we don't have it. Right now we need this step after submission to make this reference model. If you can have this one in 3D, which might take some years, then you can use also the reference model, this envelope, for the pre-check. Everything which is automatic here could help the architects to plan their buildings. So, and what we are doing in Austria, this is like the buildingSMART working group. We support implementing level 1 and 2 to the communities. We also working on level of information, level of geometry requirements, depending on the different countries in Austria. You have 9 different building codes. I know from Germany you have, I think, 16 different building codes. In Switzerland it's even more. And we are working also on the research development on level 3. How can we get this 3D development plan? And this has to be a legally acceptable development plan. So in Austria, again, as I said, if you have this development, you're allowed to build this kind of building there, and it's only checked if you fulfill the building requirements. And we're working on Austrian standards use case for this building permit process so that the Austrian standards can use that, and we're working with different institutions to train them. And as I'm from a university, of course, I have some publications at the end. Unfortunately, some are in German only, but most of them are also in English. And we use, for example, the BIM cert handbook. We use that also for training the officers into BIM to gain the knowledge they need to make this the maintenance of the laws, and also to work together with, like us, when we are creating the building permit process. So again, thank you for inviting me, and we are open for questions, I guess.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Christian. Alfredo Ingletti, unfortunately, had a train, so he can't stay here anymore. Of course, we are now at the question time, so please, if you have any question, raise your hand. I think that something that, I know it's very late, but I know also that what we have seen, I think it's very interesting. If there is no question, I will start with Pekka and asking him, Pekka, may I ask you something?
No. I was very, very impressed what they are doing in Vienna, because I was 12 years the head of the building control in city of Vantaa, and these tools are just right. We cannot progress these kind of tools already there, but you are very much far away than we are. Thank you.
Thank you. And Pekka, just a question for you. How has been, is the decision in Finland about the transition to IFC something that is also impacted the public opinion? Is something you are telling to the population, or is something that is so technical you are not using as an advertising for an environmental growth and better way to fight the challenge, to fight the CO2 production?
I think the most necessary is that the industry supports, the designers and the building industry supports the use of BIM, and that we have in Finland, so that no one has opposed, even though we demand this compulsory IFC drawings. Then if you think about the general public, the kind of as we saw with the Austria case, the public must only have the 3D vision. They don't have to take any kind of any comments for anything for IFC or standards or anything like that. And also for politicians, you cannot explain IFC or standards or everything. You have to show these 3D models, how you can use them. On the background, the kind of the researchers and consultants then make the kind of the job there behind, and only shows the end kind of users. Then they show the results. So that I think that is and the noticing for neighbors with this BIM model, it is very good.
Thank you very much, Pekka. Just another question for Oyvind. You were proposing for machine-readable regulations, you know. Have you any experience of convincing someone to prepare a machine-readable, to create a kind of regulation that could be, if not machine-readable, at least machine-readable ready or suitable?
Well, we have this as a mandate and work with it all the time. One thing is the technical aspect to have this. It has to be on an open format. We don't know if there is tools out there. We also have this legal aspect. We need to take care of it. When we technicians, engineers, and someone said, "Yeah, but this is easy. We do this." The lawyers they came and said, "No, this is impossible. You can't do that." So we need to go through that hurting process. But at the moment, I think we also struggle with find the methods. But I can also say a comment. We have tested. We talk a lot about here on environmental things. We have that in Norway as well, and we have requirement, and we have machine readable. But we have tested they have a report between different calculation tools, and they don't calculate. They don't come to the same result. So that is also an issue that we need to ensure when we go a little bit more down the road. Do we need a certification regime? Because we need to ensure that this is done right. Even as an easy task that they measure and BIM model. After the Norwegian way to do this, because we have our own standards how to calculate spaces in our spaces, and this need to be done right. So yeah, there is
Liability is a big issue.
I saw also this very good, interesting from Vienna here. We have a notification system in Norway, but we use PDF, and you also need to sign in digitally, so you know how you have seen it and everything. But we also are very afraid to give them too much information, because if there are color on this model or this drawing, and some kind change this in the construction phase, then we have problems again, because then someone said we don't build after what we was notified. So yeah, it's a lot of fun stuff with the lawyers, and we have to go through it.
Thank you, Oyvind. There is a question down there.
Oh, excuse me. Hello, this is SK from Hong Kong. We are one of the regulator in Hong Kong, mainly for fire safety. And I have seen just now a very impressive presentation and research. We are looking for ways for AI or something like automatic plan checking. Yeah, and from your experience, could you please share what is the challenges and how did you tackle these challenges in your experience? Thank you.
I think I tried to translate because the audio was not perfect here, but I think he was asking to you, to Vienna, how you talk about AI as a system to improve the checking, and if you have any experience and what do you think about what do you think about it? I'm not asking if, but I'm asking you when this could be useful for improve the checking. Is it okay?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, please.
I thought maybe he also meant AI for the fire escape.
Yeah.
But we are not using AI for any checking. We're not even using AI for improving the checking routines because we try to translate the legal paragraphs into checking routines. And it's even if you have 2,600 different checking routines, they are too little to really train or too few to really train an AI to make it good. And so if you look like at ChatGPT, it had billions of text to be trained, and this is sometimes a problem. Even we were just taking the text, which is not a legal text, but it's additional information on the construction side, and these were much too few to get a good percentage of right calls by the AI. You know, it tried to extract the text and to make some information, and we realized it was quite some time it was not right, and we had to change it. And I think this is really the problem of the training parameter. Like a student of mine was doing an AI algorithm for detecting cracks in different materials. And there was always the problem, do you have enough training material? If you have a lot of training, it works good. But therefore, we didn't use AI in this process. And it's like at the end, the officer, the agent, they have to decide. And they cannot say, oh, AI decided. And that's the reason we didn't use it. So I'm sorry that I cannot give you much more experience about AI.
Christian, just about something is the reason why I told you that we are reading your papers is that in the, probably you know that in the regulatory room steering committee there is Tamer El-Dirabi from the University of Toronto that is studying more or less same stuff. So you are talking about the use and the problem of the big data that is needed is something that is making us consider some solutions.
It's like Tina and Harald, who is not here. I have to tell it all the time because then he gets mad against me. He wanted to be here, and they want to be part of the regulatory room anyway to transfer the experience they got also to the regulatory room.
Okay, we are. The time is very late. We are only the happy few that are still here. I thank you so much for being here. I thank the speakers. What a fantastic summit we are living. Actually, this is my opinion, late night opinion. And okay, see you tomorrow.